Welcome to the Redeemed Man podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Nathan Dewberry, part of the team here at the Redeemed. At the Redeemed, we're building a Christ-centered community where men don't just survive, but they thrive in their relationships and in their walk with Christ. We believe in meaningful conversations that inspire, challenge, and bring us closer together. So part of our podcast is to hear from our guests, to listen to their stories of redemption, to hear how they've overcome challenges, and to celebrate their victories. So today I'm excited to have with us TJ Mackenzie. TJ was in the power industry for many years, but felt a call of God and founded Refined Iron Ministries, an organization that supports men through their marital challenges, fostering resilience and deep connections. He's drawing from his personal experiences and biblical principles. TJ emphasizes the transformative power of navigating marital crisis with faith and community. In his work, he helps men with tools like marriage rebuilding, guiding men through obstacles that hinder their relationship, and encouraging vulnerability and openness. We're so excited to have TJ with us. TJ, welcome to the show. TJ, I'm so excited to have you on the show today, and I'd love to really start and talk about your own personal background. You spent many years in the power industry, and yet you've stepped out of that. You got your master's degree in counseling, and now you have started Refined Iron Ministries. Talk to me a little bit about that journey and how you went from many years of the power industry to now a heart for ministry and helping guys.
Yeah. Oh man, Nate, you couldn't get two careers that are on, farther sides of the spectrum than the power industry and then counseling, and now relational coaching. I spent almost a decade in the power industry, and it was like a man's world, where, the only emotion you were allowed to share was anger, and anything else you just had to stuff it. And really high stress job. So you're getting calls in the middle of the night to show up to a car accident or a pole fire, and you're kind of in charge of a lot, and there's a lot of stress in the work itself. But then there's also a lot of stress in the interpersonal dynamics that go on, right? And so I started at age 21, I believe, and so really quite young. And so I had all these men around me that were kind of the models for what a man is.
Yeah.
And so I was observing and taking it in as an apprentice. And it was all about, being tough externally. You don't talk about what's going inside. If problems arise, you push through. And so I did. I just followed kind of the rubric. And it worked for a bit, and until it really stopped working. And life catches up with you, and you can't
have a way of doing that.
Yes, sir. It's so common, and so it's understandable, right? Like we don't want to be perceived as weak. And in our North American society, we equate emotional vulnerability with weakness.
Yeah.
And so we put on that mask, that front, and you can muscle it out for a bit, when you're younger. But then as, I got married and natural stressors with that, then I had a kid at age 27, and that was a crisis in itself, in that everything on the inside it came out, right?
Yeah.
It was the most amazing experience, but it was actually one of the hardest. You get everything mirrored back to you in this little beautiful life, and what was getting mirrored back to me I really didn't like, but I didn't know how to cope with that. The coping mechanisms I had before, of kind of just shoving it to the side, distracting, cracking a couple beers after work, I just couldn't do that anymore. And something had to give. And so in all this, my marriage was taking a toll. My wife was needing a lot more than what I was providing, and there was such a huge disconnect because I'm like, we have the house, we have the job, we have the kid now, we even have a golden retriever to make the pictures look perfect. But behind all that was just two really, really disconnected people.
Yeah.
And just a deep, honest, like not knowing what to do about it. So yeah, that eventually led to this point in our life where if we continued on the path that we were going, like we could see the future, and it wasn't good. I was getting more angry. The emotion that I was suppressing, it was coming out, and it was ugly for a bit there. And so we basically hunkered down and we're like, what are we going to do about this? And we, through a lot of prayer, came to the point of just walking away from it all. So kind of achieved kind of where I'd wanted in my career, and I just had to give it all up. We sold the house, and we didn't really have a plan after that. And I remember actually Nate saying to God, I was like, you know what? I don't really trust that you got me.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I don't trust it. But I got to make this step, because if I don't, I'm just going to lose everything. And so, yeah, long story short, through stepping away from that, we hit some more crisis, because now
sure.
I didn't have an identity, and I didn't have, what I had built my life around. And so it came to kind of a head a number of years ago where everything was coming out. We had moved back to my hometown to just kind of recalibrate, and I was in a really, really low spot mentally. And my wife is like, you gotta go see a counselor. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I pushed through that, and finally it was like there wasn't an option. She called and got me there. And it was the most scary thing I think I did.
Yeah.
But it was the most beautiful. Like, this man who I'm still in contact with today, he just came around me, and he had a way of just organizing my world for me and bringing so much of the chaos and confusion into perspective. And it's ignited my curiosity, and curiosity about what was going on inside me, about the world. I just started to see the world a little bit different. And that started me on the journey of actually wanting to do the same thing professionally. And so, I applied for my Master's of Arts in Counseling and got accepted, and eventually graduated. And I've been doing that for the last number of years. And yeah, the most recent turn has been to focus on men in marital crisis, helping them find restoration in their marriage, and if that's not possible, restoration of their life.
Yes.
And I've sat with many couples and individuals, and my heartbeat is just for men in crisis. I relate to it a lot, and that's just where I believe God has called me to just really focus in on. And so that's really the heartbeat behind Refined Iron.
So talk to me a little bit about, so you got your degree in counseling, but you're really focusing a lot more on the coaching side now. What's the reasoning with the shift? And is it a strategic thing? Is it of, hey, I want to be able to talk to guys and not be able to approach it from a different angle? What's the reasoning with that?
Yeah, such a good question. I think coaching gives me a lot more freedom. I want to go deep with a few. And as a counselor, it's amazing. I love my job as a counselor, but I go kind of not so deep with many.
Yeah.
And so as I reflect back on my experience with my counselor, he was actually more of a coach. He was definitely more of a coach in that I had way more access to him. So I could email him. I remember a few Friday nights, even got on the phone in the midst of it, and he was able to just work through an issue with me. And it wasn't confined to just a neat little box of once a week we're going to meet, right? And so, yeah, the heart of a coach is really to just be in the fire with you, you know?
Yeah, I think of it much more really from the Christian perspective of a discipleship journey, that you're walking alongside somebody in a hey, let me help you see things that maybe you aren't seeing, to unpackage things that maybe you aren't seeing, to unpackage there, or from your past or what have you. So love what you're doing, love the reasoning behind that. I think that's so important, because I think at the end of the day, that's with our groups, one of the things I tell guys all the time is you may need to get plugged into therapy, to counseling right now, but you're always going to need relationships to journey and do life with,
Yes.
and to walk alongside. And whether it's a coaching, or whether it's plugging into a group that you grow with those guys, you've got to have people around you willing to get in the mess with you.
Yes. In the mess with you. Yeah. The idea of identity has been really thick and forefront in my mind over the last number of years. But in particular, this last year, just really bringing before the Lord, like, what is my identity?
Yeah.
And so I know I'm loved. I'm a son of God, but specifically, like, what did you create me to do? And I just sensed the Lord saying, TJ, you are a companion through the fire.
Love that. Love that thought. I think
Yeah.
of the picture of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and the presence of God there. And yet we need people that are the flesh of Christ in our lives, that are walking with us through those difficult circumstances. So thank you for what you're doing, TJ. Love the heart behind it. Shifting a little bit with your faith, talk to me a little bit about where you first developed that love for Christ, and how that fits with what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home. Faith has always been, I've always been saturated in it, but it wasn't until age 23, through crisis and pain and suffering, that I really anchored. I had nothing else to anchor to but my faith. And that was when it really, really became real. And, it's deepened since then, but that was such a critical turning point in my life. And I'm far enough removed from that specific crisis that I can actually look back and be like, thank you, Jesus. I don't believe you caused that, but you certainly did redeem it.
Yes.
Because I am nowhere close. I wasn't on a good trajectory. And so the man that I am today, which is still a work in progress, it's a far cry from what it would have been. I can guarantee that.
So you mentioned redemption. In your own words, what does redemption mean to you, TJ?
Yeah. Oh, man. We're born into sin, and sin creates trauma and brokenness and suffering. And, the gospel is all about Jesus being this hero that redeems that and restores the union back to his people, right? And so there's a spiritual component of that with salvation, but then that word sanctification that's so prevalent through the Gospels is this ongoing, like, what the enemy used for evil, I'm gonna make for good.
Yes.
I'm gonna take the ashes, the pain, and I'm gonna make it beautiful. And growing up, that was conceptual. It was theory.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that sounds really nice, but I've experienced that. Like in the here and now, it's like. And if you would have told me that in the midst of the crisis, I just wouldn't have believed it. So I needed somebody else to give me that broader perspective. So I mean, on that note, I always say that crisis is either arbitrary or it's opportunity. And there's always an opportunity within every crisis for redemption, for that ash to be turned to beautiful.
So good.
So never waste a crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your own journey, you talk about the crises that have been there. Can you unpackage a little bit of maybe a particular challenging season that you walked through, and now looking back on it, the perspective that you have on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that whole season, there's been different seasons, but my 20s were hard in a lot of ways. I wasn't plugged in to any men's group, we weren't going to church, trying to do it alone, be self-sufficient. We got into marriage and we were just ill-equipped. Like, we just didn't know how to do the thing, like, genuinely. And so there was just a lot of misses, like misattunements. We didn't know the importance of intimacy and connection or how to achieve that, And so there was so much fumbling throughout our 20s, that created just a lot of pain, and then pain on pain. And, finally at 29, that's when we started to just wake up that, like, we needed significant changes, and those changes had to come outside of ourselves, because we just weren't smart enough to navigate it by ourselves.
Well, I think all of us can relate to that, of those circumstances in your life where you're like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do here? And trying to figure it out. And I think that's, in Western civilization, oftentimes we are so individualistic and independent. Yes. We miss the beauty of doing it with others. I often tell, especially young couples, but all couples, of like, you really need a couple that you can unpackage what you're walking through, that you can talk about it with, and they can give you some of the things that they've learned, and you in turn can help them in some of the areas that maybe your marriage is stronger. Oftentimes I think we do that better individually, but in marriage I think there's this fear of that, of how's that going to look to my spouse, or what are they going to think about our marriage? And sometimes I think it's easier for us to do that on an individual level and not worry as much about that as opening up about your marriage. But if you begin to talk with others and share about it, you realize there's so much common ground in those struggles. But then you also can find such great tools from others that have gone before you in some areas that maybe they have kind of figured it out a little bit, or what's working for them at least. And at the end of the day, just that safe space to be able to talk and be honest and not stay in that isolation. Because if your marriage is crumbling and you're not sharing it with anybody, it's not going to get better.
No.
It's only going to get worse. You mentioned earlier just kind of learning to connect. Often for men, emotional connection with their spouse is really hard.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about why that is the case, and then what are some of those things that as guys we can do to build a better emotional connection with our spouse?
Yeah. So connection, I had no idea how important and central connection is to human flourishing. I just had no idea. And my eyes have been so wide open, from mental struggles to physical health to, relational ruptures. Everything comes back to this idea of connection. So think about it, like, I need to be connected to God. I was designed to be connected to God, others, and to myself. And so the part that a lot of men struggle with is actually connecting inward. Like, what am I feeling? What's going on in my world? What core beliefs have I made agreements with about myself? And so when something happens and that emotion comes up, we genuinely don't know what to do with it sometimes. And so we resort to things like fixing the problem, with our spouse, or trying to find a solution. And then what happens is we disconnect. We're no longer attuned to our partner. And really, it's that connection, it's that attunement that actually neurobiologically makes us feel safe. And we can't connect when we're in that kind of fight or flighty problem solving zone, right? And so I think the main things for men that foster disconnection are shame, insecurity, and fear. And because shame just tells us that we're awful, we're bad people, right? Yeah. And so we naturally pull back. And when we withdraw and disconnect, it's distressing. It goes against our design. And so we have to cope with that somehow. And so what a lot of men turn to is coping to things that are outside of relationship. So maybe that's work. Maybe it's compulsive working out. Maybe it's an addiction. A whole plethora of things that just kind of perpetuate and don't solve the actual issue. And that negative coping then causes more shame.
Yeah.
And then more reason to disconnect. And then soon you're so far disconnected and living in secrecy that it's like, what am I going to do with this now? It's this big mess. And that's where, loneliness and isolation really sets in, and where things go really sideways. Yeah.
You mentioned shame. How do people identify that they're in that situation where shame is causing them to disconnect and make a choice to do something different?
Yeah. I believe that's where you need somebody else who knows what they're looking for to lovingly and with empathy highlight it with you with so much love. It happens. I can see it happen in front of my face. I've been trained to see that, but it looks like shutdown a lot in men, or it looks like defensiveness in men, and or justifying, or going really cognitive instead of staying kind of present and emotionally engaged. And then it's just getting really, really curious. It's like, hey, what happened there? I noticed that, if I'm doing couples counseling, I noticed that your wife said she misses you, and you just kind of pulled back in your chair. What are you feeling right now? And I get them to just tune in. It's like, I'm just feeling like she's attacking me. It's like, okay. So when she says I miss you, feels like an attack. What's that about? Well, it's like I can never get it right. I'm always failing her. Yeah. And so they're focusing in on the shame and then missing the real need. Is like, hey, I just want connection. So I think you just need other people. We need other people in our life to just mirror that back to us. I've had many men in my life do that for me, and it sucks in the moment. You often want to get defensive, but I always walk away just being so grateful for the courage it takes for men to do that in my life.
But I think that is so essential to our health, that connection. And for men, we're notorious to connect and talk about things on a very surface level versus unpackaging our feelings and our thoughts on certain things and how to engage with that. But when we do that with other guys, I think, there's such I've seen it free up men to connect with their spouse in such a more deep, authentic, healthy way, because they've learned that another guy can respect them and honor them even in their struggle. And when they do that, that really removes a lot of that shame, because here's another guy who goes, I get it. Mm-hmm. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And there's this camaraderie that raises that respect, raises that self-worth that they have thought they were the only one, or that they could never overcome it. And this guy goes, no, I've been able to overcome it. And there's this freedom that comes, and then that impacts all their other connections. But for men, at least in my experience, when they do it with other guys, there's that I'm okay because, even having a healthy relationship with your spouse, I think comes back to that community that you've got around you and who are those people you're unpackaging things with. And it's so important. You use a tool called marriage rebuilding. Can you talk a little bit about that tool and how you work through that and what that does to help the couple?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I would say this tool is probably my number one tool for couples, and by that I mean it's the most requested and the most, I have a little cutout of it, and people are always taking pictures of it. And when we talk about rebuilding a marriage, it's all conceptual, and it's like, okay, let's do that. It sounds like a good idea, but it's like, how? How do we do that? And this tool just gives such a clear roadmap to connection and intimacy. And it's derived from the intimacy pyramid that, but I've added some elements to it, and then just kind of a checklist on where you're at so you can identify it. So basically, at the bottom, it starts with commitment, because we're always asking ourselves in relationship, is this person here? Are they 2 feet in? Do they have a back door? When I show them me, are they going to be gone? And so when there's that commitment, it actually makes way for the next level, which is honesty. And so honesty is, can I tell somebody what I'm feeling? Can I tell somebody what I've been scrolling on my phone? Can I tell them about how much alcohol I drink? Can I tell them what I desire or what I think about them? Without honesty, we can't tell the truth. And it's only off of honesty that we can build emotional safety. And so, because neurobiologically, we don't feel safe if somebody's lying or they're dishonest. We can just sense it. And so emotional safety, you're kind of asking the questions, is this person reliable? Are they responsible? Are they regulated, or do they fly off the handle or shut down whenever there's an issue? And, so we cultivate emotional safety, and that actually makes way for trust. And trust is just essential in order to achieve connection and intimacy. And with trust, we're asking the questions, does this person understand me? Like, do they get me? Truly? Are there motives for me? Do they have the ability to actually connect with me? Do they have character? And what's their track record like? We're asking those questions. That actually comes from the book Trust by Dr. Henry Cloud. Amazing book.
Yes.
And then so when we can trust, that opens the door to vulnerability. And so vulnerability is really actually complex, because there's cognitive vulnerability, but then there's emotional vulnerability. So cognitive vulnerability is like, I struggled with porn, right? For instance, or I struggled with alcohol. Emotional vulnerability is picking up the phone Saturday night saying, hey buddy, I'm in it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm wrecked. Like I'm at the end of myself. Or, in marriage, it's honey, I'm actually feeling afraid. Like, I looked at our bank account the other day, and like I'm feeling afraid. I just need you right now. I need you. That's vulnerability. And it's with vulnerability that then finally leads to intimacy. Because intimacy is terrifying. Like, let's just say it. Yeah. That's why we don't do it. It's being known. It's being seen. But true intimacy is actually being like safe in that. It's being out of control and safe. And it's vulnerable, it's exposing. But on a spiritual level, there is a war against intimacy. There's
Yes.
just a war against it. Like, the enemy does not want you to have union with God. He does not want you to have union with your wife, because if he can get in between and destroy the union with your wife, then he destroys the kids. And then if he destroys the kids, then he destroys the community.
Yeah.
And then the society, and then the nation, you know. That's the tact. And we stand up and say no to that.
And the culture's hijacked that, and the enemy of this thought that that its physical intimacy is the ultimate place of intimacy versus the vulnerability and exposing the heart and who you are. We think it's a physical, and oftentimes the enemy will twist and think, oh, well, that's the ultimate experience of intimacy, and yet you miss the gift of how true physical intimacy is so tied to exposing our heart and our emotions. I mean,
Yes.
when those two are tied together in marriage, there's this beauty and explosive experience that lets you know that this is the way it's meant to be, to be able to say, hey, this is where I am, this is who I am, and this is all of me, versus a just a physical union.
Yeah.
And I think so many people miss the beauty that God's designed into a safe space that is where you can trust one another, you can be completely vulnerable, and then there's this physical aspect to it as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. You know, and for guys, we can achieve what seems like intimacy in the physical realm easier than women can. You know, women need that emotional safety more. We can compartmentalize, and so it comes across like we're achieving that intimacy. But if our hearts aren't engaged and our spirits aren't engaged in this, we're missing out on what God has for us in our marriages, for sure. Yeah.
So you've got a guy sitting across from you, a guy that's listening right now, and they're in the middle of marital crisis.
Yeah.
And they just feel like it's hopeless.
Yeah.
What encouragement would you bring to them, and how would you help them to kind of pull out from the emotion of what and what they're feeling right now to go, hey, there is an opportunity for growth and refinement through this?
Yeah. Yeah, I would press in with them and just say, tell me about the hopelessness. Let's be there together for a bit. And just allow them to process it. Because something beautiful happens when we just press in, is that people find like their own resolve often, you know, as you facilitate that space. But, you know, I would with that, cast hope that I know you can't see it right now, you're in it right now, but if you choose, this can turn into something redeeming, and you just got to trust me. I know you don't feel it right now, you don't see it, it seems hopeless, but you got to trust me. We're going to do this together, and this can be opportunity. Yeah, but I really just, you know, there's such a season for just sitting in that and learning like what's coming up. Where do you feel that, you know? And it sounds dire, right? But what happens is, and this happens day after day, is like somebody comes into my office feeling sad, and I don't try to fix them. You know, I don't even often try to just encourage them right off the bat, but I just be with them in that. It's kind of that companion through the fire. And then by the end, it's like, TJ, this has been amazing. And thank you so much. And what they're talking about, what they're saying without saying it, is thank you for like being brave enough to be here with me in the pain. I feel better, you know? And then from that launch point, we get into like, you know, there's things to learn, obviously. Like I had to learn so much about emotional intelligence and relational intelligence. There's a curriculum and some learning to happen, but initially It's just emotional containment. Yeah.
So learning that connection, that what you're talking, how can guys find some of those tools? I mean, I know you're there willing to journey alongside people, but there's guys that are looking for resources of like, okay, how can I become more aware of my spouse's needs or even what's going on in my own heart? Do you have some of those, whether it's a book or resources that you can point guys to and say, hey, here, this is a great, at least first step?
Yeah. So many good resources out there. I love the book Created for Connection by Sue Johnson. She's an EFT therapist, emotions focused therapist. And I use a lot of her work. I integrate it into my work. And it just goes to the heart of what's going on in the dance between two people. And it really normalizes a lot of that. Yeah. Yeah, just anything on emotional intelligence, I find that so many men have a negative or inaccurate view of the role of emotions. They see it as kind of something to be pushed away, when really it needs to be something that we lean into, or else our emotions are just going to drive our behaviors. So yeah, I mean, I do with Refined Iron, I do 12-week training. So each week we're learning another pillar of relational and emotional intelligence, along with one-on-one coaching. So that's what I offer. But there's so many good resources out there.
Yeah, I think when I think about my life too, it's in my journey and experience. Also, it's important to have people around you who are in tune with that. And I think getting around those people, because they help you see things that you're not seeing on your own, to just be exposed to somebody who goes, hey, I think I'm feeling this, and this is where, and even being able to articulate it in a way that maybe is not a strong suit for you, and being around those kind of guys that, are strong. And I think of it as meekness. There's this strength under control of,
Yes.
understanding your emotions. You're not an emotional person, like out of control of what we would say emotional. You're actually very controlled.
Yes.
And understanding those. And I think a lot of times when people hear being in tune with your emotions, they think it's emotional driven, and not an emotional awareness.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why people get so confused on that, and maybe even some simple ways to go, hey, as men, when we're talking about this is really what it looks like, versus some of those misconceptions?
Yeah. Yes. So good. I mean, one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And so the irony is, if we're not in tune with our emotions, they control our lives and we're out of control. If we are in tune and aware of them, now we have power over them. And so it's strengthening the left prefrontal cortex neurobiologically. That's where self-control comes from. And so practical ways is just, like you said, I love that, being in the presence of men who can reflect that back to you. I gravitate towards men who intimidate me, in that they embody like the fruits of the Spirit. They have amazing marriages, raising great families, the kind of people that the shame part of me wants to be like,
Yeah.
stay away from them, right? I override that, and I'm like, tell me everything. What am I missing here? Give me some feedback. I want to grow. I want to do what you're doing. So that whole self-awareness, we need other people to mirror that back to us. A lot of it can be done in books, but it's that much. We're in a very content-saturated society.
Yes.
We don't need more information. We just need way deeper relationships.
Oh, it's so good. Speaking about those deeper relationships, let's say you're in a group or in a context with a great friend who is struggling, and you want to be able to help support them, but you don't know how to do it without overstepping. Are there any kind of guidelines you would give a guy who's like, hey, I know my friend's really in a mess, they're not really letting me in. Is there anything that I can do to kind of be able to make myself available to them and hopefully help?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with wisdom comes really understanding what you don't know and where you need to refer in a certain way. So, like, a couple things come to my mind when you say that. I went to a few pastors who had, in the midst of my crisis, who had the best of intentions, but were really, really damaging for me. So when we get to the level of like deep marital crisis and trauma, like, intentions aren't enough. We actually need to know what we're doing. And so I would say that, but we all need friends too. And often when we put the pressure on and lean in too hard, that's when we're met with that wall. And so just creating that safety to be like, hey man, I know you're going through stuff. I don't know what it is, and I don't need to know. I can know, like, if you want to let me in. But I just want to love you. Like, I just want to love you through this. And if that means we're just going to go play golf together, and that's what you need, we're good with that. If that means you want me to listen, I'm good with that. And if that means you need me to book you an appointment with a counselor, I'll do that for you. If you want me to show up to the door, I'm there for you.
That's good. I think about it as embodiment of just being present, a source of hey, I don't have this going on in my life right now, but I want you to know that no matter what you experience and what you're walking through, I'm going to be there. I'm going to journey with you. I'm going to get in the mess with you. And oftentimes I find that can be really hard on the person who is stepping into that, where somebody's in crisis, and you have to kind of go back to a place of crisis in your life in order to have that sustaining willingness to dig in, because it does take work. It's not a quick fix.
Yes.
And most of us are very accustomed to quick results, and journeying with somebody through relational crisis is usually a very long process in our mind, even though oftentimes it really is short in the context of life. It can be a very long period of time that we kind of want quick results. And so for those guys who are leaning in, being willing to go, it's probably going to be a journey. Yeah. Right? I mean, doesn't that resonate?
Oh, totally. It's like patience, right? Patience. And that's what I have to work on in myself. That bit of self-awareness is like, TJ, just slow down. It's okay. Slow down, be with them. Don't try to fix them. Love them. They're going to get through.
Shifting back to your own life, what are some of when you look at your own marriage today, what, I hate the word pride, but what is that rises up in you that goes, man, I am so thankful for where we are today compared to where we were?
Oh, Nate, like, I have a friend. I know it sounds cheesy, but my wife is my best friend. Okay. And so, like, I don't feel alone. We'll sit, we started years ago this 15 minutes of sitting on the couch together where we would share about our day. And at first I was like, this sucks. Now it's like, if a week goes by and we haven't done that a couple times, I really miss it. And sometimes it's 2 to 3 hours. And that's been cultivated. Okay. That didn't come naturally. I resisted that first, but now it's supernatural. And I just, I
love that you say cultivated, because I think in all of our life, spiritual disciplines in our marriage, disciplines in our physical body, like, it is not something that usually is just a quick, easy fix and we do it for a few months and it's natural. Like, it takes time. And even, a lot of people have heard, well, if you do it for a month or 21 days, it's a habit. And there's this mindset, well, I got to 21 days and nothing happened. versus continuing to sow into it and realize that if you continually sow into it, you're going to reap compounding interest. Like it's going to at some point just take off.
Yes, it's the long game. So anything worth doing is the long game. It's that whole delayed gratification, right? It's easier to not sit on the couch, but in the long game, it's really not easier. We have to be sowing those seeds, and they pay dividends. Yeah, yeah.
So good. So you're sitting across, or the guys that are listening right now. Any last words of wisdom that you would give the guys that are listening in their life, maybe about emotions or about their marriage?
Yeah. Oh man, I would say you're not crazy for for kind of pushing back on the whole emotional thing. Like I've been there. Trust me, I've been there, and it makes so much sense to me. So you're not crazy. I would say just get curious. Just get curious about this world. If something's sparked, maybe press into that a little bit and just get curious about it. Often the thing that we're most resisting is the thing that we need to press into. I don't know why God created it that way, but it is. So just, and that you guys aren't alone, and you might know that by now. That sounds kind of like a platitude, but there are truly people out there who have walked through the valley of the shadow of death and have experienced redemption and restoration.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, TJ, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and excited to hear more in the future about where Refined Iron has gone and how God is using you to continue to impact so many people. Thanks again.
Thank you, Nate, so much. It's been such a privilege.